that's why he's now an AM. Already talked about it.
And when the different people transmitted, you didn't have to go back and retune the pitch rate.
It sounded different too. I think that's one of the aspects that I like is audio helps with quality. In fact, it sounds like a real human being together, involved in the mechanical force where everyone sounds exactly the same. Andy, what about you? Can you think of any facet of AM that you haven't mentioned yet?
The things that I enjoy is if you're able to hungry, I was custom bill out.
That's true. You might think that AM brings the technology down to a human level.
It brings it down to a level that we can understand. Because amateur radio, unlike it was in the early days of being on the leading edge of technology, a lot of the developments in electronics were brought about by amateurs playing in their basement. Technology has left amateur radio behind. But AM is something we can still understand and anticipate in it in the building side.
That's true, and at the same time, I think what's happening, may be leaving the state of the art, may be leaving the art behind, because I understand that there's a shortage of young, technically oriented people who know anything about RF. Nowadays, people know about digital, solid state computers, the so-called state-of-the-art technology, but there's a real scarcity of technicians and engineers that have training with RF, the kind of technology that we deal with, which is not obsolete by any means, whether AM side down or what. Yes?
Yeah, how about the mechanical skills of building the equipment?
Exactly. The mechanical skills of building equipment, putting it together, and then being able to troubleshoot. But I think there's an art to getting a big, reasonably high-power transmitter on the air that has good quality to be able to develop the sufficient high-powered audio of sufficient quality. There's an art to it. It's not just a matter of doing the mechanics of something technical. There's an art to it. Someone else had their hand raised for a question.
Well, there may not be a shortage overall, but you may be looking more at country.
What country might we start looking?
I don't know. Where are we going to look for our radios?
Well, it's across the Pacific. But I wonder how much
I use one of those. I don't build my own, and I don't have some of the things that you've shown pictures of. And I'm the first one to mention that whenever I work in AM or on the air. I've worked guys that have built their own, or I've worked guys on broadcast equipment. I've made t-shirts with people on converted CDs running 4 or 5 watt carriers. And they don't shy away from you when you say that. When you say, I'm running a 747, but 90% they'll say, well, let me go and talk to this other person that's using what I'm using. They'll sit there and talk to you for an hour. That's important. They would otherwise.
Yeah, that's very important, because one thing, those radios can be made to sound extremely good. I've been fooled into thinking it was something plate modulated when somebody said it was a 747, maybe a slight modification or a good microphone on it. But one thing we must not do, and I've heard that happen, where people have given guys cold shoulders, come in and say, well, I'm new on AM, and maybe the audio is a little bit fuzzy, I'm not quite sure how to tune this 747 up on AM. And then I've heard people come down and say, oh, wait till you get to a real radio and operate AM. Don't use, we didn't have some names of the rig. We mustn't do that. I think that's one of the AMI, AM International, mustn't become device that can have AM or against AM, because I don't like the kind of rig you're using, or I don't like the way you operate, so let's be down on someone. Let's be positive. I think someone needs to change. Positive suggestion works a lot better than the us versus them attitude. Yes.
There's a question I heard you talk
talking about taller than the what's the average taller?
Well, it depends on conditions. I've seen people put 25 watts and have a very outstanding signal. I've seen people run a kilowatt just barely get through, but the fact is that for years and years we're allowed to run a kilowatt input, and then the FCC comes up with this bureaucratic change in the regulations. All of a sudden, because the FCC decides to tidy up the rules, they suddenly, AM is running more power than anybody else, so we need to level the playing field and reduce their power while we double the power for CW and radio teletype and give sideband a 25% increase in power. But cut the AM's power limit back at least half, because they're running more power than everybody else.
Well, what's the question? What's the average?
No problem. I'd say 150, 200 watts.
Yeah, I would say,
Into the antenna.
yeah, on 10 meters when the band is open, 25 watts, that's great. In the late afternoon, you know, the Valiant, the Rangers are doing great on 75 meters and 40s. On 40, you know, in the midday. As the broadcast interference comes up on 40 and the band length is out at night, you probably need several hundred watts to do something respectable.
At least along the middle band, it takes a couple of watts. Europe has it's a medium power.
I run a 32 feet 3 on 10 meters, I run 50
Yes. One thing you should all remember, although we've been talking primarily about HF, there's an awful lot of AM activity going on VHF. So if you're plagued with a lot of QRM down in the lower bands operating AM, you can operate 6 meter AM, 2 meter AM. The old adage about I can't get on 6 meters because the whole neighborhood's going to have TVI has gone away with the advent of cable and newer designs of TV sets. And I can operate 185 watts plate modulated AM on 6 meters and not affect any TVs anywhere. So there's a lot of activity, especially in your metropolitan areas on 6 meters and 2 meters. There's a number of local nets going on both bands. So, you know, don't look past VHF stuff, because there's a lot of AM activity going on there.
That's where you live. I've monitored 50.4. I've heard nothing.
As a matter of fact, in the Philadelphia area, every morning there's nets. Up in the New England states, every night there are nets, both on 6 meters and 2 meters. I heard of nets down in the southeast, the southwest, out in California. Right.
Dean, you had a question.
Right. Will AMI be involved in any of the scheduling any of things like jamborees that have happened in the past? Are you moving from
Yes, I was just talking to Barry about that, Barry Wiseman, about publishing some things. We're going to have some operating events. In fact, there's an Armed Forces Day event from 7 in the morning to 9 in the evening on May 15th, which is Armed Forces Day, and it's a military radio. That isn't a military radio contest, we might say. The information is in the electric radio. But we're going to sponsor some events so that there's enjoyment. We may have a contest so that you nominate who you think sounds the best in your region, you know, where publishing gets the most votes.
Well, I think we should not only publish electric radio and AM press exchange, but also should try to get them some of the mainstream ham radio publications, because they'll devote a lot of time to the Philadelphia retired veterans QSO party. Certainly run something about the AM Jamboree.
Right, so we are going to have operating events, and you'd see that news in the updates that will come in the magazines.
Does anyone else have any? Yes.
This is kind of down the same path, but an angle right turn. Has anyone here heard of the Classic Radio Exchange?
Yes,
it was a couple of months ago.
Yeah, we've, a fellow named Stu Stevens at KSJ started it back in '77, he and his family, 2 other hands, N5 AIT, and his brother in Chicago. And it's a get-together for folks that have things without modulation, like Amico TX1s, Heath AT1s, that sort of equipment, S38 receivers, SW54s. There's really quite a loyal group of 40-odd people that turn in logs every time one of these events is held. I'm Marty, AA4RM. So keep an eye peeled for that. There's another pursuit. Yeah, whip out your J37 or J38 and use something that you found out at the drive-in theater on the weekend, here's your chance. It's the last Sunday in September and the last Sunday after the Super Bowl in early February. So another pursuit.
There are AM frequencies or there's phones as well as CW frequencies for the classic radio station.
Right, that's true.
Great. Tom.
I got three things. Just in passing, I came across a written story that Mr. Beveridge, who was a non-ham, had just passed on recently. The other evening, I was tuning a transistor radio here looking for weather reports, and I came across WLW on 550, and then I came across WLW on 700, and when I tracked down the story behind that, it seemed like WKRC has gone broke, and WLW is operating on their channel, and they're attempting to purchase it. So if they don't make it, there'll be a 5 kW transmitter there. The third thing, I heard this out in the flea market, and I heard it back in Chicago, reference to certain people on the East Coast who belch on 75 meters, and they're now developing a following of other people who are imitating this sort of behavior. And I don't think that that should be encouraged or imitated, and people should know that it's happening.
Of course, that's been going on since for how many years? Even back in the early 70s, when the mainstay of ham radio was in the East Coast, that controversy was going on then. I think the best approach is to maybe approach the offending individuals personally, because very often you try to approach somebody in public, try to put them down, they'll become very defensive and say, I'm going to do this. It's a free country, we have freedom of speech, and you're not going to tell me what to do. That's not throw fuel on fire. So I think the best approach is to maybe personally try to convince them. There's one thing we don't want to do is have AM or against AM, so let's try to keep exposing as much of our dirty laundry as possible, and if you can personally communicate with people, that's the best way to do it. But try to be as positive as possible. That's all you have. Yes.
One other thing I forgot when I was talking about WLW, the way the FCC rules are changing, never before have I heard of two AM stations signing the same call on the same band. I mean, I've heard of AM and FM, different programming now. This is two different programmings, almost in the same market with the same call. And anything is up for grabs now.
So they don't use the call sign of the what 550
KRC.
They don't use they actually announce WLW on the station. Well, I've noticed that with some of the
But it's a different format.
AM stations, relay FM stations, they'll also announce that. And also they don't even announce the call letters. They say this is Q103, and maybe once an hour give the call sign. So sometimes you listen for hours and hours before you know who the station is.
Don't forget your pizza gathering if you're going to have
Yes, that's what I was going to mention. Yeah, maybe Dean can have more specific directions for you how to get there. But since the AM forum, we still have, according to the timetable, we have about a half hour to the next forum. So maybe we could spend some time at the end just to mingle around and get acquainted, so we're not shoved out of the door for the next forum. So maybe we should save some time for that. Yes.
Who's got the clipboard?
Yes.
Is there a book or just a small number of books that I can look in? I haven't designed and built large-scale tube circuitry or anything like that, but the ideas occurred to me. I enjoy 80 and 160, but I'm barefoot, and I'd like to put an amplifier together. If I'm going to do that, I'd like to, if I can't modulate it immediately, at least build it so that it can be done a little later.
Well, I think some of the sources would be older handbooks, older ARRL handbooks, radio handbooks, and also the AM press exchange, electric radio, and perhaps somebody could be thinking about
just as far as what kind of transformer can be put with what tubes, what tubes are good for modulating what other.
And maybe we could even have some collaboration, some of us put together actually an AM handbook. I mean, I've thought about that kind of published contemporary publication. Because there's a lot of that information that's not available unless you have to be a book collector. Yes.
John, basically, as you point
pointed out, in your old 50s and 60s handbooks and other type of radio engineers handbooks, there are tons and tons of articles, constructions, the type of transformers for both beginners, novices, and more proficient type builders. So a lot of that information is propagated around, and you'd just be redoing and
Get
rehashing.
this place out and start the flea market.
That's right.
Buy the old books.
That's right.
One thing, remember, that to operate AM, you don't have to have the transmitters we saw today to operate AM. And before we go on, Dean.
You just walked out.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a comment, and this is Tom back there made a comment about the vouchers. This is one of the sole points that bothers me. My opinion of how to handle that is don't talk to these guys to do that. When you get these guys, like, we all know who we're talking about, without anybody saying anything. But these guys have gained celebrity status because the people they're talking to. If you don't talk to them, they won't have anybody to act on. It's the attention to their action.
Oh, there's a clone effect where people try to be little clones.
Just don't talk to them.
Yes, sir.
On a different note, I'm looking for a schematic on the Millen scope that fits in the rack. If anybody has that, I sure would appreciate it. I've had a hard time tracking it down.
That's Roger
Higley.
Higley.
Yes, and the gentleman is Colin Shirt.
Hey, Don. Few years, Marion's Pizza, and it's at the Wagner Ford exit off of I-75. I-75 South, get off at Wagner Ford Road, and there is a little traffic circle there, and Marion's Pizza is right at that location.
Realm.